Hello there. Good morning. This is Deb with Deb Talks. And this week I have brought in an amazing special guest. This is Deb, excuse me, not Deb, Des Iverson over at TitleOne. Tell the people what you do.
Thanks for having me, Deb. I'm super excited. I am an escrow officer at TitleOne. I've been in the business about 26 years without aging myself. And I handle the escrow portion of a real estate transaction.
Okay. So, and that's just why we brought you in, is because I don't think that people really understand what it is, why it's important to have escrow and title. And what does it do for them? Because again, we've talked about fee sheets and knowing your numbers, and that's part of it,
Right.
is knowing your numbers. So what really does it mean? When do you get involved in the transaction?
It's a great question because there's so much confusion around what title and escrow is and how different the two really are. Title and escrow would get involved when it comes to an executed contract. So once
they're under contract to buy a home. Okay.
Few things that we can do before that, but typically that's when we see it come together. And we start what we call a title search. So a title search would be more of the history of the property, and it would be searching for a number of things, whether the seller that signed the contract really owns the property to sell it, kind of important, right? It would do any type of liens or judgments on the property, and it would just give you the history of that property, easements, covenants, any of that sort. So
okay, so that's the title search.
That's the title search, right?
Okay.
And I call it kind of my Bible to get to closing, because that's what I'm going to be following instruction wise. And that's not the part I do. That part's too quiet for me.
Okay.
Knowing my personality.
So that's all the back end research
that's the back end
on
stuff.
the property.
We have a wonderful title department that does that part. And that could be lengthy or it could be pretty quick depending on the history search of the property.
So when you get there, you may note that to make sure they can even sell the property. Really?
Yeah, really. I mean, there'll be a lot of times that we'll see a different seller on the contract than what's on title. And sometimes that comes with death. Sometimes that comes with divorce, depending on what. A lot of times, it's heirs thinking, well, the property's mine. My dad passed and it's mine. But there's a lot more that goes through title with that to actually put that of record so that those heirs can sign it.
You know what? Actually, since you brought that up, I do get that a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, if my parents pass or if somebody passes my significant other, what can I do?
Right.
I think something you can touch base on?
Yes, a little bit. I think that there's so many different rules with it. There's a misconception of thinking, well, I have his will or her will and it's mine. It's mine to sell it. But you have to put something of record with the county to show that ownership so that we can report it under the estate selling or the PR selling. And sometimes that means
property in the state of Idaho, if something happens like that, does it have to go through a probate?
Not always. That's what I was going to say. So there's different, depending on if there's a surviving spouse or not, that makes a difference. So using me for an example, if my husband passes and I'm his surviving spouse, I may not need to probate if we don't have a huge estate.
Okay.
I could sign off saying that I'm his surviving heir, and we put that of record, and then I can sell it.
Okay.
Right? Not always the case, but in most situations.
My parents.
But if your parents passed, or say my husband and I both pass.
Okay.
There's no surviving spouse, right? And then our heirs, which would be our children, would have to handle our estate. So typically that would mean it have to be probated.
And that goes through the probate.
And court ordered.
And what does probate do for somebody? I know you didn't come probably prepared for this, so
no, now we're already streamlining.
But yes.
It is a court order. I mean, it goes before a judge. So you would take a will and testament or the last will and testament. Remember, I've had several situations over the years where there's 2 copies of different wills at different times. And who am I to say which one's correct? And which one was.
So that would take
their last wish
in front of a judge.
So the court would basically make that decision, and they would give someone the right to be the personal representative of that estate. Sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's all children, sometimes.
Now, does probate, and I've heard this, and I don't know if it's accurate, does probate also look to see if there's somebody that might have an outstanding debt.
Right, against,
Against-
and they have to, and I don't know I can't remember the deadlines and the dates of that, but you have
Okay.
to publish it. It has to be out there so that any other creditors could come forward.
But if
there's a
somebody was
timeframe.
coming to you to sell their mom and dad or anybody's property,
Whoever's house.
it's like
yeah.
this is, and that hadn't gone through something like that's something you can help them with to start
Right.
with.
And we
It's stuff
definitely
through
can
the-
tell them this one is gonna have to go through probate, and there's
Okay.
several attorneys in the area that are great about
Okay.
getting that happen. And depending on the estate size, that's what people forget, I think is what gives us the time frame.
Okay,
Sometimes it could be done
All right.
rather quickly and other times, yeah. But they basically give what's called, they court order a letters of testamentary, which for us as title, and escrow, we need that document giving us the rights of who can sign on behalf of that estate.
okay.
So,
And
and then
then-
report that.
Title also, you said they search for judgments and liens, and
Mhm.
so what kind of things would show up on that?
Well, we always hope none, but
True story.
people forget that there's more than just a mortgage on a property. There's other liens that we're looking for. Child support obviously follows a buyer and a seller.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
So when you're, and that actually brings up a really, really good point. You think you're just looking at the property and the buyer, but you also make sure that the seller,
The seller as well, because those all cloud title. So for you as a lender, title's ensuring two things. We're ensuring that the property the buyer's buying is free and clear of any liens when I put it in their name. And then we're also ensuring if they're getting a loan, we're ensuring the lender, you're going to have first lien on this property once we transfer it into the new buyer's name. Now, if there's a lien of child support or say, tax liens, tax liens follow both parties as well. Both of those would cloud title and stand in the way of us giving
And
you first. lien
potentially have to be resolved in
Mhm.
order for a lender to
in order
lend
for,
on
yeah, yeah.
correct.
And I think that's where people have that misconception that I'm just a buyer, it's fine.
Will you see medical
Medical liens
on
as
that
well.
too?
Mhm.
Okay.
So you'd have medical, you'd have state, and federal tax liens, you have Department of Labor sometimes. If there's been a shortage or an overpayment that someone owes back, and that could be a buyer or seller as well.
And those would all show by your title research on that.
Title research, so it's on the property and it's on the individual.
So not only if somebody's buying and we get the title, do we see if there's any liens, and what we would call more normal liens, right?
Would be
A
mortgage
mortgage,
liens, really.
a
yeah.
mortgage lien
Mhm.
of some kind, but all those other liens could be
On
on that
title.
title, so we
Mhm.
have to make sure it's free and clear in order
Before.
for the new buyer to transfer that title, because you sure can't take all that
You don't want it,
if they're,
right?
you wouldn't want to
yeah,
take that,
yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
One lien that we are seeing a lot of, and people don't understand it, is a solar.
Oh, yeah, solar
Panels.
panels.
Be-
Some people don't even, to their
They don't
defense, they don't even realize they're filing a lien.
Correct, because they, and now what we see is for a long time, they were actually doing like a junior lien
Right.
of some kind.
Right.
Now we're seeing UCC filings
Mhm.
filed with the
With the
state,
state of Idaho,
but
correct?
that in effect is still
A lien on title.
a lien on the property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because everything, you have to remember, everything is date sensitive. So if a mortgage gets recorded, say today, and you get solar panels 2 weeks from now and they put a lien, that's going right behind the
Behind it.
mortgage, right?
So that would have to be resolved. I'm not saying it has to be, but it has to be
It has to be
resolved.
Mhm.
in
You
order
either have to
for-
release it in order for a new mortgage to take place for a buyer, or it does need to be paid in full, depending on what the situation is. I've had a few closings, I feel like, with solar panels recently that the new buyer's taking over the solar panel payments and so forth, but that's all part of the negotiation too.
Right, into the
So,
contract.
mhm.
So, and then the other thing title does, is restrictions and covenants and things like that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so
so they'll
explain
show
what
it.
that might be.
So anything of record that was on title that's already been recorded against the property, in this day and age, we're seeing a lot of covenants for subdivisions, so HOAs and so forth.
HOAs, okay?
They don't have to put their fees of record if there's HOA fees, but they have to put their covenants, so their expectations for that subdivision.
So when you're pulling title, are you able then to pull what those covenants
Mhm.
are so that
Mhm.
that
Yeah, so in the title report,
potential new buyers?
when it's sent out, we actually have a link, because some of them can be pretty lengthy.
Yes, they can.
And you don't always want to print them necessarily,
Right.
110 pages later,
Right.
but we'll send a link where it's kind of just hyperlinked and they can click on it.
Okay.
And same thing with taxes and so forth. We try to make that as smooth as possible to at least review it, because they absolutely should review that before they sign.
Before going in
Mhm.
contract, they need
I
to know
mean,
what they're getting.
Covenants
into.
include, different animals that you can have, what kind of fencing you can have. I mean, all covenants can go from one range to the other, what colors the home can be, you know.
Right.
It just depends on the subdivision when the developers put that in. But that is absolutely part of the.
Okay. And you check for easements,
Check for easements, yep.
and so what
Power,
kind of
water,
things,
all those things are normal, right?
right?
But obviously if there's a lack of access on a property and you don't see an easement getting into the property, that's a problem. So title would catch that.
So title
And again,
catches that.
those are the ones I don't want to see on my.
Right, it's like, no, we want.
Can I make a roll? Yeah.
Yeah, let's
So-
stop here now.
So, but once
Yeah.
that part's done and the title report gets generated and sent out to everybody involved in the transaction. So typically if you have an agent, we send it to your agent to share. The
Now,
lender
if you're,
obviously gets it.
so if somebody's buying a home, is it going to the listing agent and the buying agent?
Mhm.
Okay,
Both, yeah.
so everybody and.
Listing and selling
obviously-
agent, and we let them disperse it unless they've already given us the heads up that they aren't going to be available to send it.
Okay.
Then we'll send it to the buyers and sellers. But if they have an agent, we like to keep that relationship there so that they
Sure.
can share that, go through it. And then obviously as being a part of the team, I'd say all of us together to make it happen. They can reach out to us anytime with questions. I mean, that's obviously where our specialization is, you know,
Right,
and so.
and as a lender, we dissect that report.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because
yeah.
what she has just, we've
Yeah.
already talked about is the fact that we are looking for all those things that could even come into that
Right.
property and potentially have an imperfected lien
Mhm. Mhm.
or something that could actually come in place of a mortgage lien, which is not a good thing. And
No.
it's actually just, it's just not allowed.
Right, right. Well, you can't,
So,
you won't be
you
able to
can't.
move forward. We can't move forward with closing.
Right,
And I always tell agents when we meet too, obviously a red flag is if you're listing a property and they say, we own it free and clear. And then here comes title, right? That shows a payoff and a federal tax lien or whatever, which we hope never shows, but we
But-
have some clearing up to do. Mhm.
Right.
And it just could delay closing, which we're trying not to allow to happen.
so that's the title piece then.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking that we're going to open a title, those are the things that the title department
Does. Mhm.
does.
And they generate that for me. I mean, it's in our office at TitleOne, but obviously,
Right.
we have title officers that are well experienced that can dive in and dissect that part. And then that comes to me as a finished product like it would come to you.
Okay,
And then that's when
and it shows property taxes on that
Yep.
too,
property
right?
taxes.
So the title would look at what the current, and in the state of Idaho, as current as they can be,
Yeah,
because they are paid in their arrears.
Mhm. So
Um,
confusing.
So it's, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it'll show property taxes. It'll show whether or not there's an exemption in place. That's handy to know for some.
And a homeowner's exemption is if you're going to buy the property and live in it as your primary residence.
Yep, you'll
you
get
get
that
a tax
exemption as
break.
well. Mhm. So it'll show that, it'll show if taxes are current, and it'll also show, which is kind of nice on that history piece of it, is when the seller, how long they've owned it. So the last deed of record, when the last
How
time.
far
you
back?
took title.
Can you go, or do you typically go on that search?
Well, it'll show you the last deed is all it'll show on
Okay.
there, and it'll show everything that's been recorded. So if there's, we'll use restrictive covenants, CCNRs, but then they were amended 3 times and those have been
Okay.
recorded. It will show all of them.
Okay,
It's not gonna show, the title report's only gonna show the last deed of record. It's not gonna show every deed that's been filed.
okay,
But you could get that. It's a public record. So anything that's. a
okay. That's
public
what I was
record,
gonna
you can
ask,
pull.
if that's something that could happen. I know we've had to go back
Yeah,
further
we've had
sometimes.
to sometimes, yeah.
You
yeah.
know, and that's just to make sure that something might have not been caught in one of the transfers before.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden now it's showing back.
Right, or you'll see sometimes the county will just want, look, we accepted it 10 years ago, but it really wasn't right and we need it corrected. Obviously, we have
right.
to take care of that if we can,
Right,
to try and get it to be as clean as possible, and it really is for the protection of the buyer.
right.
They
on that
don't run
property.
any into
Mhm.
problems later.
Right.
You know, when, if you wait a decade or you wait 20 years, the seller of the property at that time may not even be with us any longer, so trying to catch things sooner than later, rather than have to.
The title's so
important, yeah,
And I don't think people
Yeah.
realize that. But what's the difference between then title and escrow? Because you talked about both.
both,
And-
yeah, so
and you're
it's
an
tied,
escrow
Yeah.
officer.
yeah,
So what does that look like?
So once title's complete, which is the title department that'll surface that out to everybody, escrow really comes into play. And that's the actual closing. That's the actual transfer of ownership and disbursement of funds. A lot happens in between that, obviously.
Right.
So we have to clear title. We order the payoffs, any liens or encumbrances that are showing on title, we're fixing or paying off. And just making sure that we can abide by that title report as well, so that I can issue clear title to the incoming buyer and obviously to the lender if there's a loan involved. But
So
that
you
is,
get the fun part.
I get the fun part. That's my favorite part.
You do get.
Yeah, we disperse all the funds, so all the money that's involved, we work up, we take a, consolidation of the lender fees, the title fees, and we're taking really that loan estimate that came about months ago,
Okay.
putting it together with all the final fees, making it pertinent to the actual day we're closing. Because, you know, prorations change, dates changed, everything impacts that. And I think that people forget that sometimes. And so, yeah, we put that all together, and then that's when you actually have a closing. So closing, escrow, all kind of the same thing.
All going together
Yes,
at the
yes,
same
yes.
time.
That's my favorite part.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You
Yeah.
have the best part of that
Oh,
job.
that's my favorite. Yeah, yeah.
Because then you get to meet all the people.
Yes,
and-
yes. So
and
you'll actually
you
have
get to have a fun
signing.
day.
Yes. I feel like that's the day everybody should celebrate because all your hard work comes into
Yeah,
at the
right.
end. But that's when keys are transferred once we record, and that's when funds are dispersed. So that
Okay.
kind of makes that happen.
Typically, how long does it take to record something? I mean, what are we looking at? 'Cause
yeah,
that's
so
when you're
depending.
actually once that deed of trust is recorded,
Mhm,
right? That is when you are actually the legal owner of that
Of the
property.
mhm.
So does that happen relatively quickly?
Typically, I mean, it depends on parties involved. So obviously, we'll make it a perfect case scenario. Buyer brings their cashier's check to closing, or they've sent certified funds via wire. And once we have the lender's funds, so depending on where the lender is,
Okay.
we're usually waiting on a wire for that in most cases. Once we receive that and the approval from the lender, and that's what people forget, is once they're done signing, once I've
We
given
still have
a
to
writer's
review.
stamp.
Yeah.
Once I'm done, I'll be honest, it is a little bit of writer's
You know,
stamp,
the
but it's
packages
worth it.
can be.
Yeah. Then I send everything in and we scan to review to the lender. So that's really paperless as far as it's just digitally sent for the funder to review. And as long as there's no other documents that are missing or any what we call funding conditions, whether it be Des, you forgot your stamp on your notary, whatever small
Right.
things it is typically, or
And-
you're still
and
waiting for
typically, I mean,
something.
I will say from our point
Yeah.
of view too, typically when a lender gets that package back,
It's pretty streamlined.
it's very,
Mhm.
very
Yeah.
streamlined.
Yeah. I mean, because you've met all those conditions up to that point
Mhm.
prior to even releasing docs typically.
Right.
So I usually tell people, like, I signed one this morning, and I'd say usually by mid-afternoon, we should be funded and recorded because that happens kind of simultaneously.
And the one thing, a lot of people, Idaho's not an attorney state.
Right, right.
So, I mean, in your take, is that a good thing, a bad thing? I mean, what?
I mean, I feel like it goes quicker, but nothing against attorneys. I
No.
love them, but
Right.
yeah, like a California state that you would need an attorney present. I don't know that they even really, from my experience, even generate any docs. They're just there.
They're just overviewing
you're
and
paying
overseeing
for it.
really the same
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
that.
I mean, because
we
we're obviously licensed
do.
with Department of Insurance. We're notaries.
Right.
So we can notarize the documents as well. And so usually there's an agent obviously in the room. If there's a agent, your lender, and then me.
Right.
So,
And there's no way you can change anything on those documents. It's all instructed by
No.
the lender.
right.
Anyway, so that's the one thing I do love about the fact that I don't, again, I know a lot of attorneys and I know
Yeah.
a lot of, I mean,
Yeah.
that.
No, it's not a
nothing
bad
wrong.
thing. It just is,
Exactly.
it's just adding an extra piece, right, of review
Right.
and having to wait for that
Right.
cycle of things. But I've had a lot of closings where they'll say, can I have our documents beforehand for my attorney to review? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
We have no
Go
problems
ahead.
with that. You know.
right.
I mean, I have no control of what your documents are gonna say. You have no control over mine. But yeah, that way they can review them and just have
Right.
peace of
The
mind.
bottom line, we're a team and we're protecting the
Then-
new home
Mhm.
owner. I
Absolutely.
mean, we really honestly are. We're looking for
Yes.
those things to protect that new homeowner.
Right.
And then they need clarity,
Mhm.
maybe on the CC&Rs or maybe on the easements or maybe on
Right.
something, just some clarification there and some direction also is something that I know we can provide.
Absolutely. And it is a team effort. I say that all the time. You can't do one without the other.
Mhm.
I can't do anything without title.
Right.
So title and escrow
Oh,
go
right.
hand in hand. I can't do anything without them.
And really, honestly, they're really the unsung heroes, right?
Yes, they
they're
are.
The ones
They
out
are.
there.
Yeah. We get the glory at the end of the day, but they really are.
Right, they're diving into the
Yes,
records. I
yes.
mean, and if there's still some older,
Yeah.
some counties
Yeah. Yes, that are.
that
Yeah.
truly go to the basement to get the records and do
Right.
the research that way still.
I
I
was-
know that.
At our office, our title department's kind of in a back part of it, and every time I go back there, I'm always like, oh, it's too quiet back here for me. I need some noise, you guys. It's just my
Right.
personality.
Yeah.
But without them, I couldn't do what I do. So it
Right.
really is a wholesome,
important.
but kind of the same thing as far as agents are concerned and lenders. I wouldn't dare quote your guys' fees. That's not my specialty.
Right.
But I would give you my best estimate of ours based on that, and then you
And we do
compile it
take,
together.
I mean, we had a discussion on initial fees worksheet
Oh,
and
good. Yeah.
transparencies, a couple episodes back.
Yeah,
And
It's
it's
huge.
it's so important.
right.
You know, we do go and get an estimate to start with from you
Mhm.
guys.
Mhm.
I mean, we need to know those fees.
Absolutely.
And-
And
and they're-
taxes impact, if you're shopping a few different properties, property taxes are different. We're
Oh,
not the same
big time.
everywhere.
I know, I just
wish.
appreciate you so much because I'm telling you, it's like, ooh, can we get this estimated? Because it does.
Yes.
I mean, you can have almost the exact same priced home and
And
depending
be
on
at
the
two different.
location, yeah, of course. And taxes here might be, and I'm just throwing something out there right now, $2,000, same price home in a different location could be $4,000.
Absolutely. Mhm.
You know, and you just
And it
need to
impacts.
know that
Yes,
because that does impact that payment.
for sure.
Uh,
And people forget title and escrow fees, which a lot of lender fees are not that way. It's all based on sales price and loan amount. So
Correct.
as soon as those figures change, because negotiations change or whatnot, there's a counter offer to do that. Fees changed. I mean, we're
Right.
regulated by Department of Insurance, so those are all based on those.
Glad you
two
touched base
figures.
on that because that was, no,
Yeah.
that was my next.
Going out of
thing.
it. Oh,
No,
okay.
No, not, there's no going out. No, because there are fees. Now, as a lender,
Mhm.
we estimate what those are.
The best you can. right?
Again.
Yeah,
I know we get them straight from you guys.
right.
But they can change. And so that brings it up. Why pay? Well, we talked about the difference between title and escrow,
Yeah.
but that's gonna change those fees.
Right. And you know, we just go off of what
Is title insurance based off of, and
so there's two policies with the title
Okay.
insurance without boring you all to death. Owner's policy is what a seller typically supplies to the buyer,
okay,
that the property is free and clear, leaving the seller's hands, think of it that way, giving it to the buyer.
okay,
That is based on the sales price,
okay, and
Okay.
that the seller would pay.
typically, right?
Okay.
Because that's all negotiated in the
owner's
contract.
right,
But the
policy.
owner's policy, so saying, Deb, you're selling it to me free and clear, here you go, right? That's the
Okay.
owner's policy. The lender's policy is all derived from the loan amount, whether it's the full sales price or it's you have 100,000 to put down. The lender's going to want their extended policy to be based on what they're giving up, right? Their skin in the game, which is their loan.
Right,
And so as those figures change, people often
fee's gonna
forget
change
those
a little
fees
bit.
change.
so whether you put 20% down or 5% down, it could be the same purchase price, but the down
But the
payment.
down payment
is gonna
and your
direct
loan
what
amount
those-
changed. Mhm.
Exactly, the loan
Mhm.
amount changed, so now the fees are gonna change
Right.
slightly,
Right.
you know, so
And a lender's policy obviously is paid by the buyer because they're the ones gonna be.
they're getting the loan.
Getting the loan.
that are getting-
So
I like
Yeah.
how you said that, skin in the game, the money.
they're getting the
So
money.
they're-
I mean, this
yeah,
might be a little
yeah.
bit, but yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll see that negotiation a lot with, you know, the initial estimate they got from us didn't have seller paid concessions. So then they, you know, upped the purchase price to cover that
And that's
and
gonna
that changes.
increase that,
Mhm.
right, and then the
So-
escrow fee,
Is the closing fee, and that's based on the sales price as well. It's a percentage.
and that's straight off the sales
Mhm.
price, no matter
Straight off
if
the
you
sales
have a
price.
higher or lower,
Right,
right?
right.
Okay,
Mhm.
and is that all paid by one party?
Typically, now that's negotiated as well. We see that divided, I'd say probably 95% of the time it's shared equally between a buyer and a seller.
Okay, and that's where
that's-
we see most of the time too, is
Yeah.
it is split equally
Equally.
50-50.
Yeah. Every now and then you'll see, oh, a seller's gonna pay all the escrow fee and we just kind of go off of
Right.
that. But I'd say,
Right.
I would think you'd see the same thing, about 95% of the time it's
Yeah.
divided equally. Yeah. Because they're both getting those services at the end of the day. We're taking care of the seller side separately and the buyer side separately.
Now to throw a key
They
in
don't
there,
see
what if
each
somebody
other's-
wants to refinance?
I know.
Now all of a sudden the seller goes away,
Yeah, no seller.
because there's no seller on a
Yeah,
refinance,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
So then the
That
buyer
is-
would encumber, or the borrower, we'll call them the borrower now, because they already own it. They would pay the title insurance policy, which would just be a lender's policy,
Correct.
because they already own it.
Okay.
And then they would pay the escrow closing fee and any recording or
And
miscellaneous.
so that
fees.
fee isn't then obviously divided by 2 because
Right.
there's only
There is
one.
none.
So it is,
Mhm.
which is important to know if you're refinancing and you need to know your numbers. I mean,
Right.
that,
Right,
that's not something you
right.
do, but
No. yeah.
obviously we.
And in
wanna
that
make sure
case,
it's
because there's no sales price, you're basing that closing fee off of the loan amount.
off the loan amount.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think just people having that clear expectation of what am I looking at? How much is this supposed to be, you know? And just keeping those communications open of just being transparent with, if you borrow this amount, this is what it looks like. If you borrow this amount, this is what it looks like, or, you
But
know.
it's a great protection. I mean, it really
Absolutely.
honestly is. Even if, literally on a refinance, even we've had borrowers or homeowners at that point, they're the homeowner, obviously, not realize that maybe they had a medical lien that they
Right.
didn't realize had already gone there.
So sad, yeah.
It
yeah.
is.
Because
and
they really,
so-
honestly, in a lot of cases, don't know.
Don't know. Right.
those
And you talked about
situations, you
child
don't know.
support too. Some of those kind of things will come up on title and you just don't know. And what that means
Yeah,
is
it's a headache.
they actually could, if they wanted to, proceed with trying to foreclose on your property.
Mhm. And a big one that people forget are flipping taxes.
Yeah,
When taxes are delinquent, I mean,
yes.
it can go
oh,
over.
they can
A
get
tax
you
bill
really
can-
good.
or- Yes, yes. Not
Yeah.
quite the IRS, but I mean, it could get there.
It could, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
So-
it's important to
Mhm.
actually, what you guys do in title and escrow for the lender's point of view, and I know homeowners, buyer's point of view is
Yes.
absolutely important.
Mhm.
It's just, I don't think people understood what it did.
What
So
it did, right.
I want to thank you
Oh, you're welcome.
very, very much for
Yes.
coming on in
Thanks for having me.
and talking to us.
Yeah.
And
Hopefully we didn't
again,
put
Des-
anybody asleep back there. Sorry.
Oh, we can never put anybody to sleep. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So we, again, thank you very much. If you have any other questions as it relates to this, just IM us. And we can answer those for you.